Man, I just got back from running 20 miles. And I come here and you're smelling like shit. You smell like a wet dog that's been rolling around in shit all day. You can't expect to be pulling women when you smell like dank body odor, son. I'ma give you this here. It's a bar of fucking soap. Wash your shit off, scrub it real good, and meet me out here by the pull-up bar in 10 minutes. Now my man here is gonna teach you how to smell better, so you have a fucking chance with women.
Alright, thanks David. Well, today I wanted to talk about how to smell better as a man. Also talk about how the difference between smelling good and smelling bad and how it can make a world of difference. So I was in Nashville about a year ago for a bachelor party, and I was meeting up with this girl from Hinge that lived there. She was blonde. She had a nice face, nice body. She did like makeup in the area. We agreed to meet at this place called the 1230 Club. It's like an upscale bar on Broadway. And we had talked on the phone for about an hour prior to meeting each other. And we seemed to hit it off on the phone. And the conversation was flowing. We had even talked over text for a few weeks prior to me arriving with a group of friends. One of the things that she said to me was that she liked my eyes and facial hair weeks prior. I guess we were just kind of sending each other like selfies back and forth. So we met on Broadway and, we locked eyes when we were meeting, and she immediately smiled and I did as well. And there was just an initial attraction between us from the get-go. So we walk into the bar and then go downstairs to the basement. As I'm ordering drinks from the bar, I noticed that she's standing kind of far away from me. It was further than she was when, we first kind of embraced each other. And I thought this was weird, but I didn't want to really think much of it. And it'd been a long past few days of heavy drinking and not much sleep. She then starts to look around the room. And at this point I was like, all right, what's going on? So I asked her, I was like, hey, is everything all right? And she was like, yeah, why? And it was in an aggressive way. I then said, are you just not feeling it? You seem like, you're just kind of I wasn't super confrontational about it. I was definitely like, hey, what's going on? Are you not feeling this? And then she's like, to be honest, can I tell you something? And in my head, I was expecting her to say, give a compliment, and she was just acting shy. And I think when you've gotten positive feedback for so long, you just kind of expect it. That's what I was expecting in my head, I guess. And she then said, it's really mean. Are you sure? And when she said this, I was definitely taken back. And I had told her, yeah, I'll just, come out and say it. And in my head, I was like, what could be so mean? She then says, she's like, I'm sorry. I thought you're attractive, but your breath really stinks. And you just smell really bad. And when she said this, I was definitely surprised. I was taken back, and it was kind of a shock to the system, so to say. It's definitely a shitty feeling when, a woman tells you you basically smell like shit. But it made perfect sense, and it definitely stung in the moment. So, I called off the date. I said, hey, thanks for letting me know. I won't, take up any more of your time. And so I took an Uber back to the hotel and took a long shower. I took a long shower. I scrubbed myself head to toe, and washed myself 3 times. Put on deodorant, sprayed on some cologne, and then, put on some fresh clothes. So the way it made sense that she said this was because the night before I had split off with my friends to hang out with this girl I had met at this bar called Kid Rocks. It's a 4-story, concert venue, bar. And we ended up spending the night together. And I didn't wake up until noon that day. And then I immediately met my friends for one of the party buses that kind of take you around town, take you around Nashville. And that went until about 3 p.m. And we then went to this place that sold hot chicken. And I ended up getting the spiciest one. I forget what the place is called. I think it's a chain down south. But this must have made my breath smell absolutely terrible. And I remember we took a long time eating, and I got back to the hotel around 5:30, and our plan was to meet up at 7 with this girl who told me I smelled like shit. And I guess at the hotel, I don't know, like I said, I had drank so much the night before, and as well as during the day and the party bus, that I guess I forgot to brush my teeth. And I did put on deodorant, and I remember, and I don't even think I put on cologne that night. Since I was just in a huge rush, I think I just hopped in the shower, quickly scrubbed myself down, threw on some deodorant. But the big mistake I made is that the night before I wore this quarter zip. The night before, and then the same day, I wore this quarter zip when I went back with the girl from the previous night, and that was like soaked in sweat from like a long night out on Broadway. And this was, I think, in like April. Like it was in the spring, so it was fairly warm there. So basically, this quarter zip was soaked in sweat from like a night out of drinking, and then sleeping over a girl's place. And then, it was just more and more drinking during the day. I wore the same quarter zip because I was already downtown, and then just met up with my friends to do the bus tour. I mean, the party tour or whatever. So it made perfect sense, and it was just kind of brutal. And my brain just didn't register that I guess in the moment, like being still pretty buzzed before the date, that I should, throw on something different for the date. So it makes perfect sense now that, my breath smelled, and that like, I smelled really bad because I had a soak stained quarter zip that I was wearing for a while. So I ended up going out later that night once I met back up with my friends, and we ended up going to a different bar. I believe it was called Dirks Bentley. I can't remember. There's so many bars on. And I ended up talking to this other girl, and within a couple minutes, she had said to me, she's like, "You smell amazing, I gotta tell you." And it's just because like I said, I put on Dior Sauvage Elixir. It's like a signature cologne that like tends to smell really good. And I also, wore a fresh t-shirt and pair of jeans, and, I was just smelling a lot better. But when she said this, it was kind of like, wait, I was like in my head, I'm like, wait, really? Like, you think so? And I think, like I said, when you have a girl who tells you like straight up that you smell like shit, when a girl tells you the opposite a few hours later, it's definitely like, it's like a reassuring feeling. It's like, life isn't that bad. Like, okay, this is something I can actually change about myself. Like I said, smelling good is pretty simple. It really just comes down to like washing every part of your body in the shower, wearing deodorant, obviously. Just wear deodorant, bro. Like a lot of smelling good is just simple stuff that you can do. Make sure that you don't wear clothes that were, worn the day before and soaked in sweat like I did. And make sure your clothes are washed well. Another tip is try to take your clothes out of the washer as soon as they're done. Like, obviously that should be like, something a fifth grader should know. But, a lot of guys do that, and I'm very guilty of that as well. And then once you take them out of the dryer, just immediately once you take them out of the washer, just immediately put them in the dryer. Because I think when you leave clothes in the washer for too long after they're done, they can just start to smell. In terms of having good breath, it's also pretty self-explanatory. Just have good breath, bro. But making sure that you brush your teeth and, brush your tongue and, use mouthwash as well. And sometimes when you eat and you don't brush your tongue, that smell is still lingering, especially if it's like something greasy like a burger or fries or pizza. And at the end of the day, like I said, if you go on a date with a girl and you have dinner with her, just pop in a breath mint and you should be good to go to have good smelling breath. Like I said, to top it off, I think a signature cologne, something like a Dior Sauvage or Dior Sauvage Elixir or Paco Rabanne, Creed, something like that. Something that like lasts, it smells really good. Each of them have their own, distinct smell. It's something that tends to last like 12 to 13 hours is ideal. Is it just helps you smell good throughout the day, throughout the night. It's ideal, I think. And you don't even necessarily have to wear a signature cologne that lasts for 12 hours. You can, work with something more budget friendly, like, a Nautica Voyage or, just another cologne that you can find at like, your standard like pharmacy. I just like the signature cologne because they just last the longest, and I think they tend to smell the best as well. Also, make sure to wash your hair at least every couple days, as sometimes greasy hair can start to smell weird as well. And smelling good as a man won't necessarily make a woman that isn't attracted to you suddenly attracted, but it definitely helps for women that are already into you. When you smell good, they become a lot more into you. And I think smelling good in general just makes you more of a pleasant person to be around, as like no one wants to be around someone who smells bad. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like, feel free to comment down below, and feel free to subscribe. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care.